Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to another very interesting webinar from the FIT4RRI project, focus on use cases for institutional change towards responsible research and open science, the second part. I'm Adrian Solomon, part of the Southeast European Research Center from Thessaloniki, Greece, and member of the FIT4RRI project. And together with me, following my introductory words, we will have Andrea Riccio, the FIT4RRI coordinator from the University of Roma la Sapienza, and Nancy Pontica from the Open University, United Kingdom. Both of them will present to us two very interesting cases from this project. The entire discussion of the FIT4RRI project, and of course this webinar series, is that science and technology can create risks and ethical dilemmas, but RRI seeks to bring research and innovation into the open, meaning to anticipate consequences and to involve society. To this end, the societal actors, such as researchers, citizens, policymakers, businesses, must work together during the research and innovation process to better align processes and outcomes with values and needs and expectations of the society, of course. And this means the involvement of all the stakeholders at all levels to minimize the potential negative impact of research and innovations on all the actions that are happening. And this is what exactly the FIT4RRI project was doing over the past 3 years. So the project identifies a serious gap between the potential role and the actual limited impact of RRI and open science on RFPOs. So together, 12 partners from 9 countries over the past 3 years, we try to work together to solve this challenge. And now that we are towards the end of our efforts, we are doing these webinars in order to showcase to the entire community all the great outcomes of this synergy. So the objectives of the project itself were built upon two key factors, meaning training and governance, in order to achieve these specific objectives and goals. And the overall approach was basically structured around 3 strands of understanding, with the analysis, of course, testing and observation, and promotion and knowledge sharing activities in order to properly disseminate to the entire community all the key outcomes, from which part of them you will see today during the 2 case studies. Of course, we have a wide amount of resources, open access resources available to the entire community, such as, for example, the outcomes from the mapping and benchmarking in the sectoral analysis, the webinars that you can find online, and we are more than happy to provide you with all the links and with all the resources required to help you in your work, and of course to help your entire stakeholder group to properly embed RRI and open science in your R&D process. And even more, we have a very wide base of training materials that are conveniently hosted on the FOSTER Open Science platform, which, as you may know, is the most important repository for such trainings. And most of the RRI projects from SWAFs are actually using this open science platform to store, in an open access manner, of course, all their related training tools. And we are, again, more than happy to provide you with more details and specific instructions of how to use it and of how to identify the actual resources that you need. And specifically for this access to knowledge, I would like to mention that in this platform, you can also see the upcoming events that are happening in the project. And partly, a very important event that you can see here is the final project conference of the FIT4RRI project that will take place in March in Rome, and we will provide throughout this webinar more details in order for you, in case you're interested to attend, of course, feel free. So going into the core of the webinar, a major part of the FIT4RRI project was the organization and implementation of RRI and open science experiments. Specifically, what we understood in this project through these experiments was an actual testing and exploration of a quadruple helix approach that would allow the embedment of RRI and open science into organizations. And we had a very wide and well-balanced variety of such experiments, ranging from working with industries that would shape from a bottom-up approach an entire R&D department based on RRI, to decentralized universities like the Open University that try to embed RRI, going into even more centralized and more old school, let's put it this way, universities, such as La Sapienza from Rome, that are trying to innovate through very innovative spin-off centers from the university, and University of Liverpool that literally aimed to infuse the RRI and open science into the depth and to all the higher management levels of the university. And all these experiments were a true success. And the way we adopted our approach towards their implementation, of course, because we aimed at being consistent and providing a good value for monitoring and comparison at the end of the day towards ensuring that the experiments achieve their goals, is that all experiments followed a standardized methodology that was developed as part of the project. You can see it here on the slides in a nutshell, this graphical representation. So what happened here is that we had various stages of multi-stakeholder engagement, quadruple helix engagement in this specific case, starting from the appraisal, design, implementation, follow-up and observation, and an overall mutual learning stage. Specifically, what was happening here is that while trying to embed the quadruple helix into the decision-making factors for stabilizing and infusing the organizations with the RRI and open science concept, there were various barriers that the institutions were facing, and such barriers even started from the not knowing what are the actual quadruple helix actors involved to the actual participatory engagement strategy. Why would they be involved in RRI and open science activities? Why do they actually care about this? Do they get any benefits? So it was indeed a true challenge and a true synergy that was required to properly ensure that all these 4 experiments that we had in the project embedded RRI through a quadruple helix approach, because otherwise we cannot actually talk about RRI and open science. And with specific to this, I would like to move now to the first use case from this webinar. And I would like to invite Andrea Riccio to share her slides and to open the camera.
Yes, give me just, I'm here. Just wearing my headphones. Here we are. Welcome to everybody. I don't know if you can see me at the moment, because I don't have a reflection, but
yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks to you. I'm starting sharing my screen, but let's start from the beginning and in a proper way. Okay. Okay. I'm absolutely glad of being here presenting you our co-creation experiments that, as Adrian already mentioned, took place in one of our research center, which is like somehow devoted to innovation and like startups. So, but let's start from the beginning. But I cannot change the slide. Okay, which was our challenge when we decided to set up the experiments, and that it's the challenge that we keep working on, to establish the first RRI-based Sapienza Research Center. So the idea was to have this brand new research center where we try to like put into practice a responsible governance in order to foster possible scale up to the entire organization or to other parts of the organization. So, some assumptions. The experiment aimed at implementing, as I said, this responsible governance in an ongoing Sapienza project that was named Sapere & Co. Sapere & Co. With the aim of like strengthening university social impact and value, taking into consideration also the topic of sustainability. What we really used as an initial assumption was to consider responsibility as one of governance dimension for the organization management, together with the most, I would say, traditional dimensions such as efficiency, efficacy, and cost effectiveness. So, to sum up, which were our objective? To test in a pilot scale the setting up of a multi-actor co-created responsible governance in a complex environment. So the aim was to try to understand limits and opportunities for a big university to implement responsible governance using a pilot case. The other objective was to involve different stakeholders. So we had internal scientists, but also external ones. So like researchers coming from other research organizations, but also company or company organization. For example, we're working a lot on this with the Italian Association for Industrial. And we also worked with policymakers like the regional ones, because we tried to implement this structure, this research center, according to the smart specialization strategy of our region. Okay, I was looking for a chat. Can you hear me? Well, then another important objective of the project was to engage families and especially school children, letting them experiencing through hands-on experiments the role of sustainability in their daily life. So we selected, in order to deploy our co-creation experiments, we selected some of the pillars of RRI, as they are stated by the Commission. And the pillars were governance, as it was easy to understand, then science education and public engagement. As a result, we will see that our experiment could be somehow divided in two main blocks. The first one aimed really at the implementation of our governance and governance guidelines for responsible research and innovation in RFPOs. And the other one aimed at creating hands-on activities to foster science education and public engagement for especially families on the themes of sustainability. So, as far as it concerned the governance perspective, which is the first block that we will talk about, we can say that there was a first phase started in September 2018, in which we tried to involve internal and external stakeholders in a co-design phase to state which were, according to them, the core elements for an RRI-based research center using the theory of change. So as a methodology, we choose the theory of change developed by Carol Weiss in the 90s. And we tried, so in this way, to define which were our inputs. So what we had, just to make you an example, we had some funding from the European Commission. We also have a physical space, which was Sapere & Co. We have people willing to do that. Then, which could be our activities. So the real things that we could do, and which would have been our outputs, outcomes, and impact. When we talk about outputs, we talk about the immediate results of your activities, so you can measure them in the short time. Then when we talk about outcomes, we intended to measure the medium period, so the medium time, and so something that derives from the activities, but it's a little bit more far in time. And finally, the impact, that should have been measured as a degree of change. That's why it is called then the theory of change, because impact, so your long-term perspectives, implies how your actions are able over time to change your organization. That is the result. So we developed this logic framework that now then we will systematize it during our talk, which is pretty dense, and from where we received then a lot of information. In fact, to sum up all the information that you saw in our logic framework, which was indeed pretty messy, we can say that the setup of responsible governance in a research organization needs that scientific matters are informed by RRI. So this means that you cannot just consider RRI as an isolated item that really doesn't enter into relationship with all the scientific matters, but it should be inserted in scientific matters. So among the issues that came out are, for example, issues connected to research integrity, gender balance, open science, and open access. Another important assumption that emerged from the analysis of the logic framework is that responsible governance should be, by definition, open to society and to external stakeholders in order to receive feedbacks and contributions. One of our final aim is to build our scientific agenda in an open way. And another important issue is that responsible governance needs the establishment of common language, platforms, and procedures. These mean and it was like pretty evident also in these workshops that we had together, where we were more or less people informed about the topic we were talking about. We used to use different languages and also different ways. So somehow we should develop like common paths of work. That's an important obstacle in order to foster and to develop science and society relation. So a common language. Just to make you an example, hard scientists and soft scientists, if we can use this division, really didn't speak during our workshop the same language. And another important thing achieved by the workshop is to understand that one of the main outputs of responsible governance should be real institutional change. So not just having, I would say, a set of rules that really doesn't imply any cultural shift, but real institutional change with the bridging of profit and non-profit research and innovation actions. Because at least in Italy, at the moment, it seems very different working for profit and non-profit actions while putting them together in continuity towards the responsibility was something that the participants to the workshops considered very important. And finally, according to the first outcomes of the workshop, what emerged is that we should base responsible governance on a shared set of values reflected in simple guidelines with proper indicators aimed at stressing the social value of research and innovation. That means that one of our achievements that will go beyond the life of the project is to keep working on this governance dimension, trying to implement sort of shared guidelines for what responsibility is. Then we moved to a second phase concerning our governance perspective, which took place in last April, so 2019. And the idea was to formalize the concrete implementation of a responsible governance. In this case, we choose another tool for working together, because the participants were the same involved in the previous workshop, which was like a balanced scorecard. In order, we thought to assess 4 dimensions, each of them guided by a specific objective, in order to understand how to implement responsibility. And the 4 dimensions were financial, user perspective, so how users perceive and give value to what we do, internal processes, so how we can change from internally our organization in terms of deployment of activities, for example, and then growth and innovation, meaning what we could do in terms of new processes, new action, or in new implementation of already existing action to foster responsibility. That's how our balanced scorecard looks like. So just to go on the objectives, because then we will have the table of indicators, and as you will have, these slides were made available for you. You can go more specifically through the single indicators. We will just see some example. But here it's important to see how we started from a general objective and we declined it into specific objectives according to the 4 dimensions that we are looking to assess. So from the objective of implementing an RRI-based research center, we had the idea of investing in responsible and sustainable actions in order to look at the financial dimension of our action. In terms of users' engagement, the objective is to engage users and ensure their satisfaction. So also by developing, for example, survey on the action that we are implementing. As far as it concerns the internal processes, we look at, our objective was to foster the uptake of a responsible governance. And as far as it concerned growth and innovation, the specific objective was related to develop new initiatives for responsibility and sustainability. And in Sapienza, we are definitely working at that. Just to make you some example, we launched a call, an internal call for funding public engagement actions from one side. And on the other hand, we are developing our dashboard of indicators to assess all these dimensions. It has become sort of strategic objective of the university. So more or less, we are trying to transform what we did in the co-creation experiment into our real processes. And here you have the tables, just an example tables. For example, concerning the financial objectives in terms of investment, for example, we had a percentage of expenditure for awareness campaign and events related to responsible governance. And we fixed a target and some actions. And more or less, we did the same with all these objectives, defining proper indicators, related targets, and linked actions in order to deploy how we should act in order to foster responsible governance. That's the financial perspective. Then we have the user's perspectives. For example, an idea was to implement a loyalty card and giving some incentives in order to develop an engagement strategy customized to different stakeholders. And again, we have, in terms of internal perspective, the idea of to assess the degree of engagement of quadruple helix stakeholders, fixing it at least 20%. So having not only in our activities internal stakeholders, or generally speaking people from academia, but also trying to favor and to foster the collaboration with all the actors of quadruple helix. And as far as it concerns growth and innovation perspective, the idea is to, for example, organize bottom-up initiatives. So to have, for example, a call to sustain bottom-up initiatives launched, trying to have them as a target at least 3 per year. And another important thing that I want to underline is that when we try to develop this balanced scorecard, we try to keep together the two, I would say, parallel dimensions, because they are even more and more integrated nowadays, of responsibility and sustainability, looking at sustainability in an open dimension, in an open perspective. So not only in terms of environmental sustainability, but also looking at the dimension of social sustainability and economic sustainability. So we have tried, we really didn't succeed to define by the end of 2019. The end of the year was pretty a mess, but I keep this just to keep in mind that we have to do that, a set of guidelines for superior and responsible governance. So we will do that at the beginning of this year, for sure. But now let's move to the education and engagement perspective. We worked on that mainly in May 2019, organizing hands-on activities. So first of all, we had these hands-on workshops for kids and families that targeted 2 main actions. The first one was to prepare bioplastics with daily ingredients. For example, the kids used coconut flowers, organic waste, and so on. And on the other hand, they had the chance to work on 3D printing with organic materials of superheroes. In this way, we give the children and their family the chance to have a first approach to both sustainability, but also to science and science education in a very easygoing way. Also because our ideas were that engaging researchers from the other side in activity of science education and public engagement, it is a responsible action itself. And somehow, so this was our ideal link with these 2 different perspectives that we took into consideration in our experiment. And here you have some picture of how we promoted these activities, because we did it in May, and that's important because it still testify an important engagement internal activities, because we did it in May, because in May we have some extraordinary opening during the weekends of our university museum that are coordinated all together by a museum hub, centralized museum hub. And we took this occasion to create actions together with our museums and to start collaboration with them. And here are some pictures. For example, here you can see the bioplastics that resulted from the first workshops. Kids trying to make bioplastics. You can see the veggie on the tables, for example. And here we have the superheroes. So these superheroes made in organic materials, and they are working on that, experiencing how to build things. It was really hands-on. I was there and it was extremely fun. Let's move quickly, apart from the description of the experiment, to talk about how we approached the quadruple helix. For sure, the cooperation was favored from all the quadruple helix actors by the experiment's venue, because Sapere & Co was funded to be interdisciplinary and multi-actors, and it is by definition devoted to cooperation and cross-fertilization among different actors and different competencies. For sure, we can underline a common difficulty that first of all, resides in academia, because in reality, the university system, and some people notice that and told this to us, is still reluctant somehow to cross-fertilization. Also because we really don't have, at least in Italy, a proper national strategy or an incentive structure to favor working on different disciplines, and especially with different actors. So there's still something that we have to do internally from one side, and on the other side externally by pushing, being one of the biggest universities, pushing somehow the change, the national change, a real change. As far as it concerns institutional change, first of all, we can say that responsible research and innovation and open science are, in the Italian system, defined third mission. So we used to say that the first mission is didactics, the second mission is research, and the third mission of universities, and generally speaking to research organization, is like creating linking with the territory and cooperating for the social and cultural growth, as well as the economical ones of the society. And I'm sure that our cooperation experiment, as I was also saying to you in the beginning, giving you some example of what we already did, laid the groundwork for some degrees of institutional change. So I do believe that something moved and something changed. Also because we worked by informing the university governing bodies, and they were like pretty happy about what was happening. Still a little bit, I would say, far away from like taking part to the actions, but they were informed, they liked it. And so probably there will be some other steps, as the one I told you, like internal calls or like sensitive awareness sections and so on. And also the fact that we were able to involve researchers, especially coming from hard science. Our like main pilot case was managed by the Department of Industrial Engineering. So some people that are pretty far, ideally at least, from the concepts of responsibility and so on, because they really work on very, very like strict things, very focused on their scientific matter rather than on the impact of their work. So, which should be in the end our real outcome concerning also institutional change? Make researchers aware that responsibility and openness, far from being another administrative issue to comply with, represent an added value in the research work. That's the very, very aim of our activity, not only of my experiments, of Sapienza experiment, but of the entire, I could say, FIT4RRI project. The idea that responsibility and openness are not just something that you have to do because they are beautiful, but we are trying to show, since the first work package that aimed at making a critical analysis of what was happening in the science institutions, could be that RRI and OS could be useful in the daily work of researchers, and as a reflection in the reorganization of research organization. Policy support requirement. As I already said to you, our final step will be to define a simple set of guidelines for responsible governance in Sapere & Go, with the aim of scaling them up. If we can have this scale up, before to have this scale up, we need that these guidelines will be approved by our governing boards. We usually have an academic senate and a board of administration, because this will represent a real political support towards RRI and OS. We are not in this space, but we are working to achieve that. By the way, as we already said, some policies to further this process have already been launched. A working group with researchers and administrative staff to cope with definitions and indicators concerning intermission. And this is an activity that already had an important first success, because we approved, and also the rectors and our general director approved a first set of indicators concerning, among the other dimension, public engagement and sustainability and responsibility. And we also launched an internal call for funding that was over just last Monday. So now we are analyzing the results for implementing science and society relations. So we will see how it comes, but for sure, giving some incentives for like creating a science and society engagement will favor the spread of these activities. which are our next goals? Finalizing the guidelines, of course, keeping working on the stakeholders involved in the design phase and looking since now at a possible scale up, implement within Sapere & Co new science education activities on a regular basis, so not waiting every May to do that, but trying to do that with more regularity and not only with like kids and families, so with, or generally speaking with civil society, but also trying to engage the quadruple helix actors. So just to make you an example, to organize like policymakers workshops or industry workshops. And we're trying also to connect, and somehow we are like succeeding in doing that, the experiment with other ongoing initiatives. One among the others, Civis, which is a project in which Sapienza works actively, which is funded under the Erasmus call for European universities, and that looks at implementing civic university. So we have one of the activities that I'm looking after for the university, which aims at implementing open labs. And these open labs for sure represent an interesting way of giving a follow-up to our co-creation experiment. For me, that's all.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this very interesting presentation. It was very, very comprehensive, and it definitely substantiates all the efforts that were undertaken in this project for the past 3 years. And it's very important for everyone to see in details, all the great work that you have been doing and that, of course, the entire consortium has contributed to. Now, I would like to ask the audience if anyone has any questions now, just to unmute their microphones and try to state them. Or if not, if they don't want to do this now, they can just type the questions into the chat for everyone, and we can have a bigger Q&A session at the end of the second presentation as well. It is up to the audience, basically. Okay, so I guess we will just proceed with the second option. I would like to invite everyone to write the questions into the chat, and we will have them in the pipeline for the Q&A session at the end of the second presentation. So thank you very much, Andrea.
Thanks to you. See you later.
I would like to invite now Nancy as the second presenter.
Hello, so let me just start my video. Hello, hi everybody. So what we are going to present is what we did at the Open University with regards to the FIT4RRI project and the use case we had with regards to the FIT4RRI project. But our use case was a little bit different from the one that it was presented earlier, because we did not have a use case that was relating on responsible research and innovation per se, but we decided to do a research experiment in a research and in a responsible and in an innovative way. And that's why we decided to look at how to text and data mine big scholarly data. And I'm going to explain in my slides further down how we did this in a responsible and innovative way. So the problem that we were facing was that right now, when think of you as being a student or as being in an academic university environment, and where we have readers who can access the literature that their university subscribes to. But then what happens right now with all this literature is that people can log in through a username and a password, and they can get the results that they are looking for. And this could be the articles of the papers they are looking for to help them with their studies. But it is not possible to act in the same way and get results that you are interested in a machine readable form. And why the reason that this is needed is because we have millions of publications being published every year. According to a research study, there is 1 million of publications per year. Even though we have open access, which enables more the text availability in a machine form, nonetheless, this open access percentage is very slow. therefore is very low. Therefore, there is a very big gap between the content that it's open access and it's closed access. And then at the same time, it is very difficult to systematically analyze this information at a large scale. And it's also very difficult to, for right now, universities, what happens is that publishers send to universities contracts which have some clauses where text and data might be mentioned, but it's very difficult to understand and analyze these contracts so that researchers are 100% sure that what they do it in legible form, and that their machine access can be done in a way that they are not going to be sued, for example, in the future. And this is a barrier and an obstacle to text and data mine large corpus of information. So what we would like to see happening is to provide machine access to the full body of research of text and data mining. Now, there are, of course, text and data mining challenges, and there are mainly three ones, but what we did in our experiment, because we did not have plenty of time to conduct this experiment, and we had a specific time frame, was to make sure that we deal with the two more important ones, and this was the legal issues and the technical issues. Because we are in the UK, the legal issues was easily solved, and the law created an exception on the 1st of June of 2015. And this means that everyone who wants to text and data mine large corpus of data, this can be made possible, provided that this is not for commercial purposes, but it is for research purposes. So in reality, we only had to deal with only one of these TDM challenges, which was the technical issues. Now, to proceed with that, we had already done some work in the past before coming to this FIT4RRI project. And in fact, the work is that we tried to see how we can aggregate content from open access publishers, but also from traditional publishers who give some of their papers in an open access way. Just to add a little bit of open access jargon, the hybrid gold open access outputs. Now, what we found out was that there were many technical challenges, and this was the fact that metadata was not, the way that metadata was presented, it was not in a clear and in a unified way. There were restrictions with regards to accessing to full text, and most of the content was accessible via content that it was available on publishers' websites, and not like an internal backend system where content could be accessible. And this created all these difficulties, which we managed to solve. And in the end, what we did is that we built connectors to each specific, from each specific publisher who has its own in-house made system. And we created a connector for each one of them. And we used also the Crossref TDM API to put all this information together. As an end result, what we gave back to the end user was one endpoint where the user could actually get all these text and data miners could get all these open access content. So we worked on 5 different publishers, which was Springer, Elsevier, Frontiers, the Public Library of Science, and Wiley. And we managed to get a lot of data from them, which are now available for everyone to use free of cost. Now, with this experiment in the FIT4RRI project, what we wanted to do is that we wanted to go a step further and extend this to make text and data miners, to make it easier for text and data miners to connect. And we use the word eduTDM just to make it in accordance with what there is everywhere in the world, which is the eduROM. And as people who are on eduROM, and they can be everywhere they want in the world, but they connect with their own institution's credential to get access to the internet, the same way we thought that this system could be used, which would be that users, irrelevant of where they are in the world, if they have an affiliation with a UK institution, then they can use this for text and data mining purposes. And what we have done is that we have composed a white paper to develop a conceptual solution with which the problem stakeholders would agree upon. And we, as I said earlier, we intentionally did not cover ownership, development, and management. And this was intentional because we had very big players in the working group that we created, and we did not want to have the discussions evolving around mostly about ownership or management or development, but we wanted first of all to see if this was technically possible. So as I said in the beginning of these slides, what we tried to do is that we tried to conduct this experiment in a RRI way. And the way that we managed to do that is first of all to engage all research stakeholders in this specific experiment. That's why we used in the working group that we created, we used experts from various systems around this specific topic. So we had experts from publisher systems, and we had experts from text and data mining, and from policy making, for example, where we invited policymakers and experts in making with organizations that make recommendations and spread the best practices, but also experts in industry. Nonetheless, we realized that we are missing very big categories of people who would be who would be interested into these groups, but unfortunately we did not have the opportunity to engage with them and involve them in this co-experiment, and this was again due to the time frame that we had in this specific project. For example, we did not involve governance, or we did not involve a lot the society. Nonetheless, we are trying to build this gap by trying to involve the society with the publication of the white paper that we have composed, which is going to be published on the Foster platform that Adrian showed you earlier with all the FIT4RRI training activities, and then disseminate this white paper via suitable dissemination routes so that the public becomes aware of our work. But based on what we have learned is that provided that we had more time in our hands, then we would be able to have more groups engaged with our own research. So what we tried to do with this working group is that we tried to reach a common ground, some statements that all of us would agree upon, because we thought that this would make the perfect starting step, but also would give us the green light to start the discussion going with regards to other more specific things that related more to technology. That's why the sentences that we all decided on from the very first meeting was that text and data mining has the potential to help us improve the way that research is being conducted. Everyone was at the same level that UK is legally allowed to perform TDM. And I am mentioning this because some of our members of the working group were not residing in the UK. that UK affiliated researchers should be able to get all the content that their university lawfully subscribes to. And they should be able, apart from reading this content and reading it with their own eyes and downloading it manually, they should be able to do that in a machine-readable form. And that it is a challenge, of course, indeed, to gather all this information, and that we need trusted authorization layers to have TDM. And then we have some technical challenges and some organizational challenges. The technical challenges were the lack of common standards or the choice of formats that this would happen. For example, would it be JSON or XML? And the interoperability between systems, because as you can understand, for all this to happen, systems need to be able to talk to each other. And then we touched upon a little bit at the second working group meeting that we had the organizational challenges, only because we listened to the working group's needs, and the need was to discuss about this, but we decided not to work further on them. And those organizational challenges was the ownership and the governments and the incentives for publishers. So why should they be engaging with this project? The cost for developing such an infrastructure, and what should be the risks, the standards, and for all this procedure to take place, but also how this could be delivered and what kind of services should be provided. In the white paper that we have already finalized and we are very soon to publish, we discussed about some functional requirements, and we divided our stakeholders into 3 big categories, which are the researchers, and by that we mean the text and data miners or any other researcher who has the skills to perform text and data mining, the universities and the publishers. So those are like the 3 big groups, and we created some functional requirements for each one of these groups. And we just wanted to make sure that the tool that we are going to create would be such that it's going to fulfill all these functional requirements for all these groups. And failure to do so then would mean that one of our stakeholders would get disengaged with this process, and then we would lose them, something that could be detrimental to the project. And apart from the functional requirements, we also had developed some non-functional requirements, and this relates more to how the service would work. And we had to make sure that all of us, again, are in agreement with regards to those non-functional requirements, again, having the same end result and alarming result, which may be that the project that would not go on. To make this more easily to be visualized from someone, we have created this graph. And what this graph shows is a little bit how the system would work. So what we wanted to do is that we wanted the researcher, who is on the left-hand side, to be able to have only one and one point somewhere in the middle, which would be the problem to solve, and then all the other points, which are the publishers, which may be start from A and they may be finishing to Z, or even more than that, then this would not be a problem for the end user. So the box in the middle should be the service, the blue box in the middle should be the service, and this service should solve all the problems from the end of the screen where the publishers are, but then on the other side of the screen where the researcher is, he should be able to get easy access to information, and he should not be worried about what happens at the back end between after the box in the middle and the publishers. And then to make this a little bit more in detail, what we decided to do is analyze this and say what kind of responsibilities and rules would be performing each of these services. So for example, the publisher would be the ones who would be doing the authentication authorization and searching of the content, but then the service would be doing a validation, a URL redirection, but also would be responsible for the content aggregation, but then the caching and the searching and the users monitoring, something that it was mentioned earlier at the interaction model. And it was something that it was required from the service in order for it to work as it should be working. And that is all that we did in this project. What I would like to say is that in the beginning, it was a little bit difficult for us in order to see how we can make this more in an RRI way. It was the first project that we did where we spent plenty of attention on not so much on how to conduct this whole experiment, but how to do it in a way that we make sure that we do it in a way that confronts with the RRI principles. We are not experts in the group on RRI, and we used a lot the guidance from the experts from the FIT4RRI project. And we understand that even though in the beginning it was something that where we spent a lot of time, effort to plan and organize, because this was a brand new for us, then I think that everyone in the team knows now how to do this, and it sounds a little bit better. And when we start our next project, then we would have this in our mind, and we would start thinking of the RRI components much earlier than what we did now, because now we focused a lot on how we are going to do this, like technically, and we did not focus so much on all the stakeholders and all the 4 quadruple helix factors. I think I said this. I said this in a wrong way.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for another interesting presentation, and very, very different than the previous one, which of course brings much added value from a totally different perspective, since your organization is unique institutionally in terms of its decentralization. And now, since you're still connected here, I would like to ask you some questions. So what I've been doing over the past minutes, I've been collecting some individual questions from people and just try to centralize them here. Then I wrote them in the chat. And since you're still here, I would like to start with your questions first, and then we switch to Andrea. So the questions for you is basically, can we talk about RRI, open science, open access governance and enforcement in such a decentralized institution like the Open University? Or rather, the research teams see an actual benefit and there is no need for a top-down approach?
I think, and based also that from what we heard from Andrea Riccio earlier, I think that I could not say that like what we did is something that works perfect. And I think that we need to join forces and do this in both ways. It is true that what we did it is the way that we did it was a decentralized way, and it worked for our case, but it worked for this specific group that we dealt with. And nonetheless, we did not have the opportunity to spread this work with others within the institution. So yes, we managed to do this in a way where publishers could get benefited, researchers could get benefited, but then we are missing the researchers from our own institution. So I suppose that this should have been done in 2 ways.
Super, this is very, very good. And it also links with the very nice comment from Katerina below in the chat. And she's talking about the actual institutional change. And of course, there are quite a lot of obstacles, especially in your case, due to the decentralization. But still, it is a very good step forward. Okay, thank you very much, Nancy. I would like to move back now to Andrea. And we have several questions for you. Welcome back. So the questions are listed, as you can see here in the chat, in the sense that what were the main blockers? Were there any conflicting goals in the process? And is RRI enough to solve all the challenges, or something more than that is needed?
Oh, thanks for this very easy question. Well, I don't know if I have all the answers, especially about the role of RRI, but what for sure is that there were for sure blockers. First of all, one of the blockers is cultural. So it means that due to the fact that there is a lot of bureaucracy nowadays, at least in Italian university, one of the blockers should make them available, easy to understand that they were not working on some administrative issues, but they were really working on their research matters. So they're deeply working on something that belongs to us more than to me, because I'm an administrative staff for the university. So that was one of the first blocker that derives from the cultural organization. Another blocker for sure is times of organization, because while you want to achieve a goal and you set a certain time for achieving it, that deals with your human effort. So I can do these guidelines in 10 days and so on. Then you have the time of organization. That means time for approval, time for having hear different but necessary voices about that. Just having, for example, an appointment with the rector could be somehow hard in our university, because consider that we have 59 departments, more than 300 professors and so on. So timing mismatch is another problem, because we have a natural time and an institutional time that sometimes are in conflict. And this could be probably the conflicting, not goals, but the main conflict that we had. And on the other hand, I do believe that even because we are not supported by our national system, just consider that RRI was mentioned just in one document from our Ministry for University in 2014 during a conference about RRI. So there's not a national system supporting us in doing that. There is still some reluctancy in understanding these words. What I can see on the other hand is that the degree of change is huge. And probably also Adrian and Nancy could have seen this somehow concretely, because when we started, I always came to the meetings and involved engineers in this. And I was sure that in the first meeting, they were looking at me puzzled, saying, come on, this is a lot of unuseful things. And day after day, year after year, now they are somehow committed and they are the best evangelists of RRI we could have. So that's more or less what we can say in terms of bloggers and conflicting goals. On the other hand, well, RRI is not enough. RRI for sure is an important part, because one of the main assumptions of our experiments and in general of FIT4RRI is that science is in a big crisis in this moment, an institutional crisis, because years have passed and all these big institutions are in crisis. So we do need to recover this crisis of trust that we have, for example, towards citizenship. And we should do several different things to achieve this. One of these could be sure working on responsibility in a broader sense. So for example, working on societal engagement, because people are more and more stimulated to contribute by, for example, on social networks and so on. So we have to take the good part of this attitude and transform it in something that could support trust in institutions. That's one of the examples. But for sure, RRI is not enough. But if we see at RRI in a broader sense, and not only according to a list of 5 keys, but a way of behavior.
Actually recorded and written down so far. I would like to thank you very much, Andrea and Nancy, for this very, very good presentation, and also to thank very much the audience and the webinar organization team. And I would just like to mention that all the recordings and the presentations will be made available on the Foster platform. So the link is basically down here in the chat. So everyone who is interested, of course, you can share this to your entire network. So thank you very much to everyone. Wishing you a very productive year, and keep in touch with us and with all the RRI and open science work. Thank you very much.
Bye. Join the conference. Final spot.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.